Good afternoon, anti-novelists. So, if you don't know me, if this is your first time here, you haven't been around, my name is Victoria, also known as the anti-novelist. I am the author of the 566-page doorstop, lovingly known as Zettelkasten for fiction writers. My mission is to teach you how to use the Zettelkasten system in order to get your novel written. So with that introduction out of the way, here's what I want to do today. I want to take you quickly through my work environment as I'm literally sitting here working. It occurred to me that this walkthrough might have value for those of you that maybe have some ideas and you aren't quite sure how to get into the numbering aspect of those ideas. I'm going to show you my doing it in real time. So hang on, here we go. The first thing I have is I have my notebook. Now, if you're a member of Scott Shepard's community, you know from Scott that he firmly advocates for doing all of your handwriting on a yellow legal pad. I wish I could do that, but I have what I can only lovingly, only partially jokingly refer to as PTSD about yellow legal pads. Some of you may already know I am formerly a high school and collegiate championship debater, and we used yellow legal pads for all of our debate rounds. So I don't need to use those anymore. They've worn out their welcome in my life. I need something more efficient for what I do. The main reason is I don't like folding pages over the top of a legal pad. Instead, I prefer a coil bound 8.5 by 11 fine lined binder, and that is where I do all of my handwriting for the newsletter that I'm working on, for my book notes. All of that goes in here. So with that said, let's take a look at what I'm working on. Currently, I am working on the research for the debut #1 issue of what will become my physical monthly newsletter, also known as the Anti-Novelist Monthly. A concept that I am hip deep in researching right now is partially a known narrative theory and partially my contribution of new material to that narrative theory. And this thing is called the chronotope. Chrono meaning time and tope meaning space. It's simply the time and the space that exists in a story in order to anchor the reader. So I've started working with that extensively. So here's iteration 1 of that work. I simply took a blank note card and stuck a Post-it note on it for chronotope. So as I was just doing reading of academic journals, as I was doing reading in books. This is Michael Bachtin's work. He's the fine gentleman who initiated the idea of the chronotope. So as I'm doing all of this research, I was just creating general cards, and they look like this. Some have mind maps on them, some general observations, my own ideas mapping out what I was thinking about these things. These are just my raw notes. Now you'll notice in a different pen, I've gone in, my notes are in blue. In a black pen, I've gone in and I've just numbered in 1403. Because when I looked at my index, in my index, the 1400s are where literary theory lives. So I simply labeled the chronotope as 1403, and a subdivision of that, the kairotope, is either 1404 or 1403. So at this point, at this high level, I'm just making myself a little bucket, one for chronotope, and then the word I invented for my own theory, which is the kairotope. Okay, so those general cards, before they get indexed, before they get really numbered, anything, I'm just dropping them into one of those two buckets just for safekeeping. So then, as things start to develop along, as I start to hone my thoughts, as I start to do more research and those pieces start to lock together, you'll notice over here, I'm starting to put together what I think of as chains of thought in note card form. So I'm just taking those cards and I'm moving them around and making for myself a coherent chain of thought for all of those ideas. When I'm working with fiction, it works exactly the same way. I might start with an idea for a scene. I might add something from my experience collection that reminds me of the way the light comes in through a window. I might then add a card that reminds me of the way that fresh ground coffee smells. Anything that I need to build that scene, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to start lining those cards out together so that when I sit down to write, I have all of those things right in front of me. But for this case, I'm working with nonfiction. So the next thing that I did after I had these ideas kind of developed for myself is I started to sketch out a little mind map for what that organization was going to look like. Now, if you're a visual person like me, you need to kind of see what your organization looks like before you commit to addressing and numbers. I say that fully realizing everyone has to choose the method that works for themselves. The amazing and esteemed Kathleen Spracklin has many, many videos for how to create addresses, how to organize your thoughts into note cards and those note cards into a system. She does it differently, but our systems fit together. So think of this piece as just showing you the raw process. So after I had all of my cards from my research, and after I started to kind of nest those cards together for what the argument or the ideas looked like, then I sketched it out on paper. So I decided that I was going to give these concepts the number 1403. I gave it a /1.100 because this is the first iteration. It's the first coming together of these ideas. And then I decided everything underneath it would get slash and a letter. Obviously the first letter's A. If anything that comes under the A will get a .1, .2, .3. If there is another big idea in this chain, it'll get a B, etc., and so forth. So how did I do it? Well, first I sketched out the idea, and then I assigned the numbers. So I go from novel to chapters to scenes to setting to the kairotopic device, and that gives me my 5 subsections. So the next thing I did is I went to my note cards and I simply created those addresses. So 1403 1.100/A, that for me is what I consider a capstone card. It's the first card in the series of these ideas. The next one, I'll leave that there so you can see, is an A.1, and that's the next item. So remember that high level item on my list was novel. All right, so that first card is novel. The next one under it follows my sketched out list and it's chapters. So it gets A.2. Going further on down that skeleton tree, the next one is scenes and it gets A.3. Continuing on down, setting gets A.4. And finally, when I get to my idea, my kairotopic device gets the A.5. And then under devices, I have 2 examples of that, objects and anchors. So I go ahead and nest those underneath. Kairotopic object is A.5/A, and you guessed it, kairotopic anchor is A.5/B. Now you'll notice I've already got something tucked in there, and it is an example from a novel. Deborah Harkness's The Blackbird Oracle gave me a great example of using a kairotopic device, which is a perfume bottle. So that one gets A.5/A.1 because it's the first card behind that A.5/A. So that's what that process looks like. So now I have a definition of the Latin for object, and I've sketched out some ideas about that. So that's going to get installed back here where that perfume bottle card is. It'll probably get installed, I don't know, before or after. I haven't decided yet, but it will go behind that A.5/A card for kairotopic objects, because this is talking about the definition of an object, which helps me explain the concept. So there you have it. That is just a quick overview for how I go from books and papers and my research to the high level of just sketching out my thoughts and figuring out my ideas on the note cards. obviously these will get sorted and they will get filed within this existing system. So some of my raw research still has to be processed. But the next thing that I do when I have an idea of what that structure kind of looks like in my mind so I can sort my ideas, then I just sketch it out in my notebook and I come up with a sense of how I want those addresses to look to file everything. And then I literally go through and create those cards, which give me a section to start that section in my Zettelkasten. So there you have it. I hope that was helpful. Just a quick overview for how I workshop an idea or workflow an idea. I just thought it might be helpful for you to see. So with that, I will leave you here. I'm going to continue on with the rest of my raw research and process all of that into my now existing card structure. And I will keep on rolling and keep on writing. So as always, have a great day. I will see you in the next video.